Okay, we are officially live. It'll take a minute for people to start logging in here, so I'll wait for folks to come on. But also, I know a lot of people are going to be watching the replay and the video, so we'll kind of get things kicked off that way as well. But first of all, just so grateful to everyone who is here, and most grateful of all to Pastor Erich Kussman. Kussman, yes, is
Yep,
that
yep, that's me, yep.
okay? So Eric and I have been aware of each other. I've been aware of his work for a few years now, and he has really such an inspiring personal story. And lately, I've been seeing his name again as he's been sort of on the front lines on what's happening with ICE in New Jersey and the protests that are going on at Delaney Hall. I'm going to let him share a lot more about the work that he's been doing. And even at this very moment, as we have this conversation, there's some hearings going on in New Jersey to address what's been happening at Delaney Hall. He was just telling me that many of the lead folks that were um, being held there who were part of the protest movement have now been moved out to other places. Um, so they're doing the best they can to kind of break the will of people who are trying to raise the alarm and trying to speak out about the terrible atrocities that ICE continues to commit across this country. Um, but it's it's not gonna work. There's more of us than them, and I just wanna keep telling this story. I was also saying to Eric, you know, when we planned to have this conversation, I did not know that we'd be having it the day after 15 arrests were made yesterday morning in Minneapolis, primarily in South Minneapolis, including of at least one member of, both Education Minnesota Teachers Union and the Minneapolis Public Schools Teachers Union. It seems that they're going after educators. Educators, again, here in Minnesota during the ICE surge in January, were some of the folks that were most deeply affected by this surge outside of those who were, of course, personally abducted. But educators were doing the best they could to care for the kids, some of whose parents were taken and abducted, kids who were having to hide in their homes with their families. And so we're watching this. I've heard, hopefully, from some attorneys that these charges, like the charges that were leveled against the Broadview Six in Chicago, are very likely to be unsubstantiated. We've seen I read an article today, maybe one or two instances of some incitement to violence, but the vast majority of what's been handed down in this court case is just people talking about organizing to raise awareness, people organizing to observe. This is not some vast militant terrorist movement. It's neighbors caring for neighbors. And for both Eric and I, this is about our Christian faith. This is about the gospel of Jesus. This is about caring for your neighbor and doing exactly what Jesus has called us to do. So, Eric, tell us a little bit more about what it's been like for you. If you want to go into a little bit of your own personal background, how you became a pastor, and then how that calling has led you into this work to protest ICE and to be active at Delaney Hall, I think that would be great. And I know people are so anxious to hear from you.
Absolutely, well, thank you for the invitation to come speak with you today. As we know, we're dealing with an ever-changing climate of what's going on in the world. Some days are worse than others, but they all have been that bad altogether. But, yeah, I am a called and ordained minister in the ELCA, pastor St. Bartholomew Lutheran Church in the great city of Trenton, New Jersey. But, what got me here is, I'm gonna give the short version. You can share with your listeners the A&E documentary they made about me a while back. But, pretty much, my first prayer to God while I was incarcerated is I said, "God, if you're real, you're gonna let me out of jail." And the very next day, I got mistakenly released 2 weeks before my sentencing, which made the New York Times. But, for somebody that didn't grow up in the faith or in the church or even read a Bible in, like, all my young adult years, like, God kinda drew me in, even though I was mistakenly released, I went back in and served 12 years in New Jersey State Prison. So, that gave me a lot of passion for justice because I realized a lot of folks that were incarcerated with me really didn't deserve to be there. Then just the conditions, as I'm gonna talk about Delaney Hall, but, there's no difference between the conditions at Delaney Hall and, say, like, New Jersey State Prison or Rahway State Prison or the other 2 GEO Group facilities the state contracts with in the city of Newark. But, when we talk about Delaney Hall specifically, originally, when Delaney Hall was, uh, uh, owned by the county and the state, right, the Department of Corrections. It had this guise of being like this halfway house reentry type thing to get people out, but the conditions were just as hard as they are now. And so I actually gave state congressional testimony in a congressional hearing to get that place shut down years ago.
Hmm.
So when it popped back up, I said, "Oh, here we go again." But even before it popped up, ICE has been a regular presence in the city of Trenton since I'd say about September, October of last year. And it's right before Trump took office, where we seen the surge of ICE coming into the neighborhoods. And I'll be the first one to admit, if ICE's job was to actually go after like the gangs and the cartels and stuff like that, I'm like, oh, they're doing something to fix the neighborhood, so there's no drugs being sold in the city. But that's not the case. I think it's a very small, very very small percentage of actually any kind of criminal intent people are getting abducted by. What I have noticed in my own neighborhood is they're getting mothers and day laborers and people that actually work for a living. Teenagers that were about to graduate were detained by ICE, and this is in New Jersey. And I think one of the stories that really gets me, this was last year when there were 2 children, probably ages between 5, 7-ish. They were zip tied by ICE sitting at Franklin Park 2 blocks from my church while they were across the street from the church dragging the mother out of the house. And I said, "That's just not okay." Um, Thankfully, working with, local grassroots movements, we formed over 100-person rapid response team. For when ICE shows up, we show up. And, yeah, they all know us by name now, but that's cool. But, we wanna make their job as very uncomfortable as we can. We keep track of who they are and what cars they drive. So, we've been very, mobilized over here, but, it hasn't stopped a lot of the abductions. We've noticed the most time they abduct people is between 4 and 6 a.m. in the morning when people are going to work or getting dropped off at school. That's been a constant, uh, perpetual, theme here in the city of Trenton. And, then, while we're going through all this, they decide to reopen Delaney Hall. They reopened Delaney Hall, and, of course, me being who I am, I was like, "That's not okay." They're not there's no inspections, there's no this. They even arrested, Mayor Raz Baraka, who's the city mayor of Newark, to go inspect with his local fire departments and everybody, and they arrested him, and a congresswoman also, LaMonica MacGyver, she got charged, and for the clergy that were up there that day, ICE decided to throw us around a little bit. So we decided to come back the next day and form a line against the fence, trying to put our bodies out there to try to get them to, not in or out. But, we've tried so many different avenues, right in Congress, right in protest, Congress, elected officials, city officials, and it feels like, we're stuck. It's either people fear the federal government or that they agree with it, and that's the only things I can come up with. So,
Yeah. No, so much of what you're saying is familiar to me to what we went through here in Minneapolis. The 4 to 6 a.m., that was such a common time. This rapid response, we did so much of that as well. The targeting, school pickups, school drop-offs. We had to have people watching bus stops. Um, and what strikes me is that, you know, when ICE was active and they're still active, right? I mean, we had a story come out earlier this week from Bemidji, Minnesota, which is about 3.5 hours north of the Twin Cities. This was a place where there's a lot of Trump's a lot of support for ICE. And there was this sense in Minnesota, and I would imagine sort of similarly in New Jersey, that like, well, maybe this is a Minneapolis problem. This is a Trenton problem. This is not going to touch us in other places. But just this week, they went after a group of roofers up in rural Minnesota, and the owner of the company was someone who'd been cheering on ICE in Minneapolis and saying like, "Oh yeah, they're only going after the worst of the worst," and they're not. They're going after hardworking folks. They're going after parents. They're going after elderly people. And what also strikes me too is, when this was happening, we had Greg Bavino here, and he was, we also had Christy Nome, thankfully, both of whom are no more in official positions of power in the government. But there was so much being done on social media. And one of the things I feel like that has shifted is they've gotten better at hiding it. And you have like Tom Homan now who will sort of pretend to talk a good game and act like he's this sort of law and order person, but they're doing the same tactics. Have you seen, in New Jersey, has there been much sort of right wing social media trying to highlight this? Or do you feel like they're trying to keep it quiet so that people will not have the same, maybe outraged reaction that was happening in Minneapolis?
Well, New Jersey is a very intriguing state. It's almost red, it's
Right.
like borderline red, but I if you go into, like, the metro areas, it's blue, progressive,
Right.
but you go into, like, the farmlands, like South Jersey, all the way to North Jersey, like in the mountain area, and ironically, Ocean County down the shore, there's a lot of, pro-ICE, pro-Trumpers, but, it's funny you bring that up because, when we were out there, at Delaney Hall holding the vigil, Proud Boys were gonna have a rally right by us, and yeah, and so they put out all these flyers all over, and we're watching all these people. So we're expecting a lot of people. There's like 20 of them, and there's like hundreds of us. We're like, "What do you do?" But it just shows you that the majority of folks don't in New Jersey don't support what ICE is doing. But I think everybody's so caught up with the news or they fear actually speaking out for their neighbors. And, I think that's what gives our, tradition as being Lutherans, we have a theology for this, right? Um, and this
We
is
do.
what I've been, like, screaming the church-wide, screaming to my
Yeah.
synod. We have this theology, and it's like the confessing church, Martin Niemöller, we have Dietrich Bonhoeffer, we have these great theologians that we just ignore, but they were there for such a time as this because they went through similar circumstances in World War II Nazi Germany. Right? They were just abducting people, mass people abducting people, then they didn't hide their mass anymore, and they abducted people and threw them in concentration camps.
Yeah.
Um, Even in America, I can't forget about, like, Japanese internment camps, right? That's another thing.
Right.
But,
Right.
when we speak about the African American community too, you have to consider the war on drugs from Nixon and the Bushes and those eras too, where it was this mass raids of just taking young black youth off the streets and incarcerating them.
Yeah.
Um So, I don't think it's like a singular moment. This is just a progression of what America already has been, you know? You have those they call them the originalists of the Constitution, where they actually wanna have that 1776 version. They don't have the enlightenment, I would say, of seeing that all are created equal, all are created in the imago Dei, the image of God, and I think the better we get in that kinda aspect, the more we won't allow these atrocities to happen. But racism is a huge issue that's dealing with this, and I'm not poking light at the Ukrainian situation, but we have a lot of Ukrainian refugees in New Jersey.
Hmm.
I don't see any of them getting picked up by ICE and detained,
Interesting.
and they escaped war. So
Interesting.
so and I think what a lot of people forget is the reason why we have such an influx of South Americans coming to America is because America created 99.9% of the issues in their countries. Um I was just, preaching at Delaney Hall the other night. We're having a moral movement every Monday night there, and, I was talking about the Magnificat, how the Magnificat was actually banned reading in Guatemala
Mhm.
because of the liberation factor that it comes through with. It was actually banned because America overthrew their leader, put in, like, this dictator that was oppressing people, so people were trying to rise up, and the Magnificat was banned from public reading. Isn't that insane?
I mean, yes and no, right? Like they know that if people actually hear the gospel and the freedom of the gospel and the liberation of Jesus, that they're not going to be able to sell Christianity as a white supremacist movement
Yeah,
anymore. So they want to keep it. But let me ask you about that. So the ostensible reason, initially for ICE coming in these huge numbers into Minnesota, into a state that is very low actually in its immigrant population and in its undocumented population, was supposedly this quote unquote fraud being committed by Somali immigrants. When we look at the numbers of those who were actually detained by ICE and those who were deported, it is primarily Latin Americans from Central America, from Mexico, and in some cases from South America. Um, w- w- and as you say, they're not targeting Eastern Europe. They're not targeting white immigrants. They're not targeting folks who are white, who are undocumented. Who is primarily getting targeted from what you're seeing in New Jersey?
It's mostly those from South America and Central America, but also they've been snatching up a lot of Haitians and
Mm,
Liberians. So,
yeah,
so this is a black and brown issue, that I think us, because of the privilege of what we look like, need to rise up and be a buffer so that they are protected, because we're able to throw ourselves out there, and not get as much harm back as
yeah,
people of color can. So the stories, though, are so heartbreaking, and the influx of ICE. Like, ICE has been in my neighborhood this morning, ICE was here yesterday. They're most likely gonna be here tomorrow, but, it's just the way they're targeting folks with no real law and order, right? Let's talk about, they don't follow law and order. They don't follow the dictates and the mandates that are set by our Constitution and our state and federal legislators. It's like they just let these soldiers out on the streets because they dress like GI Joe. They don't.
yeah,
New Jersey.
yeah,
And what's sad about all of this is the aftermath that we're being left with. When they're taking families away, when they're taking kids, like high school kids, there's this aftermath of fear that people are fear to go to the stores. People fear going to work. People fear living life. Right. So, it's a crazy time to be alive, but I think this is why it's essential to actually be the church here and now. It's like our food ministries, we serve, like 90% of the folks we serve are migrants, right? 90% are immigrants. And we serve roughly about like 300 families a week in a small little church, a neighborhood church in Trenton, New Jersey. But I don't ask for papers because you hear people people go to these food pantries and they're demanding electric bills, identifications, and all that. And if you're dealing with this trauma of ICE, right, you're not going to want to show that information.
no,
So, how do we create the barriers that doesn't affect them? I've gotten calls where kids were left at school and their parents are gone.
yeah,
They call the church now, and it's like, all right. But it's that aftermath. People can't afford their rents now. They can't afford paying their electric bills. They can't afford food on the table. And I think this is where the church can fill in those gaps to walk alongside these families and kind of put a hedge of protection. They become under the church's protection. So if ICE comes, we show up.
yeah,
And I think that's what's needed now more than ever, you know.
yeah,
And I think I get angry with some colleagues sometimes. I do. So I'm just gonna talk all full. I'm not gonna sugarcoat nothing.
yeah,
I'm not. I'm a straight
yeah.
shooter.
Well, we've got a history of Lutheran quietism in this country, and there's especially, among white Lutherans, it's this hiding beneath the two kingdoms theory and hiding underneath sort of our ethnicity or our traditions. And so go for it. Tell me.
It's like, oh, that's the first I've heard from college. I'll keep their names off it, but
Sure.
I will blast them eventually. So that's coming. But oh, I got too much to do. Oh, I have this. Oh, Sunday sermons. Oh, Bible studies. I'm like, what? Why are you studying the Bible if you're not going to live the Bible? But that's a whole nother story. But
Yeah,
the words of Christ, right? Um, so I get that inactiveness, or that lack of empathy, and to me, it's like apathetic. They don't care. They can say all the great swelling words. They can study at the finest institutions, but if it's not trickling down to your heart to help you give you the tools to love your neighbor as yourself, then to me, you're not really a pastor. I would call you a charlatan. So
well, and it's like we've been sort of waiting for this moment of like why and there's so many folks who have fallen away because the church feels irrelevant, it feels rooted in the past, and as you've said, like, this is the moment. This is the moment to be the church. We certainly experienced that in South Minneapolis. My congregation is just a couple of blocks away from Roosevelt High School, which was the same day Renee Good was killed, not far from our church as well or from my home. That afternoon, supposedly had a car chase that ended at Roosevelt High School just as dismissal is happening. And again, as you say, these guys are using this role in ICE as an excuse to be violent towards unarmed people and using it as an excuse to exercise their hatred and their racism. And that's what happened at Roosevelt. And so we had confirmation that night and we had kids coming to church who had witnessed this. And when you talk about the aftermath, we're really living that here in Minnesota right now too, because there's such a deep trauma. And I think that there were these moments of like, hey, Bruce Springsteen wrote a song. And I mean, you got to love Bruce in New Jersey as well. But, we had these moments where it felt like, hey, we're Bad Bunny at the Super Bowl. Like, hey, we're making progress. We're making an impact. And what I've noticed in the aftermath is it's just so clear that it wasn't enough. Like, we have so many children, particularly, who are traumatized for the rest of their lives. We have so many families that have been broken up. We have folks who are deported and are separated from their families. We have people who are still afraid to be outside their homes. We have restaurants and small businesses that will never recover. But I want to ask you too, and I see we have some folks who've joined recently. Pastor Eric comes into ministry with his own history of experiencing incarceration, and he has his own history of formerly testifying before Congress about Delaney Hall in particular and the conditions there. Um, and you talk about like this this sense that you have that like this is in some ways like this is why I became a pastor for
Yeah.
moments like this. This is And then we have this other sense in the church where it's like, well, we don't want to make people upset. We don't want to be political, or we're scared. And it seems to me like, on one hand, you would have reason to be scared. Like, you've been incarcerated before. We have people being arrested for standing on the side of immigrants. And so what's that like for you? Does it does it trigger you, bring back memories, of what it was like to be incarcerated? And how do you sort of overcome that sense of like, wow, maybe I could be targeted again, maybe I could end up in that situation again because of this activism?
Well, you're gonna probably laugh about this, but I say this, I did 12 years in New Jersey State Prison. What, are they gonna lock me up for 6 months? I could do that standing on my head in the corner. You know what I
Mm,
mean? That doesn't scare me.
mm,
You know, there is some traumatic feels. There's times I've been out there where I'm getting rubber bullets and the real big balloon ones they got? Them things hurt. My whole chest is bruised up from getting hit. But, the tear gas and I've been through all of this, so, I grew up in the inner city Plainfield, New Jersey, right? I've already me and cops didn't get along when I was growing up. I got maced by them, I've been shot at by them, I've been beat up by cops before. When going to prison, it's the same thing with the corrections officers. It's the same thing. They tear gas units when there's riots or tear gas units when there's a fight. So I understand what these detainees are going for, but the difference between me and them, I did something to wind up to go to prison. That's the number one difference. These mothers, these teenagers, these working fathers did nothing wrong to be detained and abducted off the streets to be thrown into these hellholes. Going to those kind of places is hell on earth because they don't treat you as a human. You know, there was letters. The women went on hunger strike in the facility. Also, so my heart breaks because of the conditions they're in. They're getting transferred now completely far away from their loved ones that they can't see, and they're gonna have such a hard time seeing them. They're going to different states. Like, that's not okay with me. So when you talk about am I scared of them? I'm not scared of the cops. I am not scared. I think the Lord put me in such a time as this because I don't have fear. People are like, "Whoa, I'll fear the Lord," yes, but when it talks about humans, all you can do is hurt me.
yeah.
Okay, does that make you feel better? When, at Delaney Hall, when ICE was getting super aggressive and they started beating on the protesters, pepper spray Mason, I just put my arms wide out open. I said, "If you wanna beat somebody up," I had my collar on, I said, "Why don't you beat me up?"
Yeah.
And it shocked them. They're like, "What?" I had my arms stretched open, you know? Um, on that day, though, this is a fun one I'm gonna tell you. There's a picture floating around, which actually caught me over 100 death threats, which was fun, by progressive people. This is even better. Um,
Mm.
to kinda spell off the narrative, because my life testifies that nobody's beyond redemption. If I was judged from my past, I deserve the most fiery pit of hell. Like Paul would say, "I am the chief sinner." I think I got Paul beat by a lot, you know? But, I say that because why was I saying that? But anyways, I'm just gonna jump off somewhere else. But, you it's all this stuff like oh, the ICE officer, there we go. So, I was offering prayer to the ICE officers.
Mhm.
All of them rejected me but one. So
Wow.
he's like, "Sure, I'll pray with you." And
Wow.
I said, oh, in my mind, I'm like, "He done messed up." We hold hands in front of everybody.
Yeah.
So I prayed, I said, "God of grace, heal this man's heart. Allow
Mm.
him to repent and turn from these ways and renounce evil for what it is. Allow him to see the common humanity that we all share."
Mhm.
Prayed this prayer. Amen. He gave me a thumbs up. Soon as I gave him the thumbs up, the superior tapped him on the shoulder and took him in the back. Never saw that officer again.
Hmm.
But I say that because nobody is beyond redemption. You know
Well, and I think that that speaks to, when we talk about uh, I've spent a lot, unfortunately, of the last, decade studying these right-wing Christian movements, and they're so committed to hierarchy, and they understand their faith in terms of hierarchy, and I think ICE really weaponizes that, and they weaponize the hierarchy of law enforcement or of the military. And so it makes it really difficult, because as you talk about, I think that was a powerful thing, and it's something we are called to do as clergy if we believe in the power of prayer, if we believe in redemption, if we believe, as you've said, I am the chief sinner, which I think is the absolute hallmark of our Lutheran faith. Um, but they're gonna use the hierarchy to dehumanize even folks within ICE itself. And I think that's really the battle that we're ultimately fighting is this dehumanization of an authoritarian government,
mhm.
of this ongoing AI movement. And so as soon as you try to bring some humanity into it, they're going to shut that down immediately.
But that just leaves it up to us. That's, that priesthood of all believers. It leaves it up to us to be on those front lines, continuing to offer prayer, continue to preach and sing songs. And we had church out there the other night. I'm gonna tell you on Monday we had church out there, and because it shows the humanity of us,
Yeah.
and I know many of them ICE officers. I know they're having hard times sleeping at night. When I was talking to another one, I was just
I
talking.
think that's why there's such heavy drinking, right? Like,
Yeah.
'cause they,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I was talking to one of them, but he wouldn't respond, but you could see it in his mask. He was breathing so hard, in and out, in and out, in and out. His superior moved him to the other side of the line. I followed him to the other side of the line, and I kept continuing to preaching the gospel to him. He was getting up visibly upset again. They moved him to the other side of the line, so I walked on the other side of the line. When they put him back in the middle, I decided to sit in a chair and just look at him. But there's power in the words that we use, God has empowered all of us for such a time as this, if we are willing to answer that call. It's like the old prophets of old, "Here I am, Lord," you know? But, Delaney Hall has been, the only way I could describe it is an active war zone,
Yeah.
you know? Now
Well,
every
and sorry, tell me about that. When you were initially testifying about Delaney Hall, what are some of these pre-existing issues that were already in effect before they start bringing in folks who, as you say, have not even committed a crime?
we could talk about the water system,
Yeah.
piping in that place, brown water that doesn't heat up or it heats up too much, it's not drinkable, it's not potable at all. I don't know who they contract food with, but it's not good, but just like the state of New Jersey who, uh, one of the food suppliers is Aramark, and Aramark is owned by Christy Todd Whitman, who's a Republican, her
Right.
husband, but, who wants to, um, the lack of ventilation, the chipping walls. You can't just come back in and throw a cone of paint over something and say it's fixed. Like that's not where. So the reasons why it was closed to begin with was because of the condition of the building. Without allowing proper channels to see and inspect that a human could be in there, you just open it up and lock up a mayor. So that's one of the main issues right there. Minus them just snatching innocent people off the streets, but now you're putting them in a dungeon. It's 2026. Why are we so draconian in how we treat people, right? And that goes the same hand in hand with our prison systems. It's the same treatment, the same conditions. But we label somebody bad, we label somebody criminal, we label people illegal because we just want to name people, name things, right? So we don't think about them as being human beings. Oh, they did the crime, they do the time. Oh, they shouldn't have crossed over here illegally and all that nonsense. Listen, my people came out here after World War II. There was nowhere near this kind of scrutiny for folks coming in from Europe after World War II.
Yeah. Tell me about, New Jersey recently elected a new governor, Democrat. Yeah. Yeah, and we have to talk about this too because, people really wanna make this into a red and blue issue, and they wanna make it into,
Oh, this
but
isn't a right or blue issue. This is a right and wrong issue. With
right,
you know,
right. And
and
tell me about, the disappointment in
uh,
this new Democratic governor, and why do you think she has been responded in the way that she has?
I'll tell you like this. I'm going to preface saying this because of Mikey Sherrill's actions, our new governor. I will never vote for a Democrat again.
Wow.
Um, she knew what was coming. She was very inactive at first. Those that have been abducted and housed in Delaney Hall under these atrocious conditions were pleading for her to come see.
Mm,
She refused to come for a little while. You had, Cory Booker showed up, Andy Kim shows up a couple times, which Andy Kim, I give him credit. He took a stream of pepper spray right to the face, so
yeah,
kudos to him. But, she made this press conference, but I'm gonna preface it. I'm gonna state the history. There was a comment made by one of Trump's cronies that they were gonna stop international flights to Newark before FIFA,
yeah, yeah,
right? So that's a comment I want you to think about
yeah,
because FIFA's real big around this area right now.
yeah.
There's a lot of money involved. Always follow the money, I'm telling you.
Well, and they were threatening that to Minneapolis too, but ultimately
So,
they're
the
that.
next day after that threat,
Yeah.
I attended her press conference where she's
Okay.
talking about because the abuses by ICE and people getting beat up and pepper sprayed and just the chaos that was ensuing. Her exact words, "I'm gonna send the state police to protect the protesters." We're like,
Right,
"Oh,
right,
okay." The very next day, here comes the state police. And guess how they showed up? Battle ready. They had horses.
wow,
They were all it reminded me of a scene from the riots in Newark in the '60s and '70s that you see.
yeah,
They came for war.
yeah,
They didn't come to protect protesters, they came to assault protesters. And one reporter who works for the AP, her leg was broken because she got trampled by a horse.
jeez,
So and they're shooting and tear gassing and beating everybody up, arresting people. Um, so a lot of us here truly believe that she did that to save FIFA, to clear the streets of the people. And check this out, then she creates this thing called a First Amendment zone. So you will you that implies outside your little 36 by 36, my
there
First
is
Amendment
yeah,
rights
yeah,
are valued.
yeah,
According to the US Constitution, everywhere in America is a First Amendment zone. So there's a lot of constitutional issues just with how she handled that situation.
yeah,
So now she avoids a lot of things. She talks a good game, but actions speak louder than words. As James would tell us, even though Luther hated James, faith without works is dead.
right. Well, and again, the parallels between the kind of rhetoric we were hearing from our mayor in Minneapolis, Jacob Fry, contrasted with his actions and the ways that he deployed the Minneapolis police and as you talk about the aftermath as well, we're in a situation where we're paying astronomical amounts of overtime
Yeah.
to our police department, which has now also we have a police chief who has resigned in the face of corruption and scandal. Um, so we're paying all this overtime, and it's like we're funding law enforcement that, for the most part, our city police, as you say, we're not there to protect protesters, but to add and to heighten an environment that was not conducive to peaceful protests, that was not conducive to protecting vulnerable people, and continuing a tradition of intimidation. Um, I want to ask you. So you've been a past. Remind me what year you were ordained.
Uh, I Reformation Sunday of 2020.
All right. Well,
But
I love your Lutheranism. It's the kind of Lutheran I want to be as well. And you came out of Princeton Seminary, which
I'm
is
banned
not what's that?
I'm banned from Princeton Seminary.
We're gonna have you on another time to discuss that one. I love it.
Well, I'll give you a quick one. I'm gonna give you a name and you can research him. Michael,
Yeah.
the chairman of board of trustees, who's also one of the wealthiest prison profiteers in the United.
Uh,
So, yeah.
that part. Yes.
Eh,
But you got your degree out of there and now you're a pastor, so I'm glad that you made it out. But yeah, I mean the connections and the complicity and among wealth and private prison profiteering, this stuff goes deep, as you well know. And at the same and it can feel very intimidating because, as you say, we've got in many cases, we have small churches, small budgets. We ourselves as pastors, as faith leaders, are often operating on our own thin margins. What has been, if church leaders or church members are watching this from other places and thinking, this sounds really inspiring, but like my pastor would never do this or my church would never go for this. Did you encounter resistance within your congregation, or in what way has this instead really energized and enlivened your congregation? Tell me about that.
I think I'm blessed and humbled to have such an amazing congregation. Uh, they're 100% supportive. They're involved in the feeding ministries of the church,
Mhm,
and a lot of mutual aid to the families
mhm,
in the neighborhood. Um, Even through all this, a whole 'nother service was created for all the Spanish-speaking folks in the neighborhood, which our attendance in that is like 5 times the number of the regular Sunday service, which is amazing.
wow.
But they provide the worship, there's actually this care because these are Trentonians, right?
Yeah.
These are
Yeah.
people from the city that seen the horrors
Yeah.
from whether they're white, whether they're black, whether they're Span Latino. It doesn't this is a common struggle that they see.
Yeah.
So and I wish I could say all other churches were like that, but this has not made me a lot of friends. Just the way I'm outspoken and even with prison stuff and justice issues has not made me a lot of friends in the city of Trenton. Um, but I'm encouraged. I get yelled at to take time off a lot. But
What's time off?
I and I get it. I get
Yeah.
it. But someone that came from the environments I came from, that God allowed me to go on this path, right? I actually look at this as a call,
Mhm,
not a job.
mhm.
God has entrusted me, as Luther would say, this little filthy cankerous worm over here, but there's somebody who came from nothing, on paper,
And
statistics,
not in the way that politicians say they came from nothing most of the time, but, like, for real.
but not for real. My mother was a heroin crack addict. I didn't have a dad. I grew up in the streets. Like I remember 9, 8 years old breaking into neighbors' houses just to get something to eat with my older
Right,
sister. Like, I come from a whole different environment.
right.
But to now to be able to study at Princeton, which I can't go back to, haha. But, to be a pastor of a church, to be entrusted with the spiritual and physical well-being of the South Ward of Trenton.
Yeah,
Because it's not just who comes to church. I talk with people
yeah,
often in the neighborhood. My
yeah,
office hours are outside. I'm sitting on the stoop of the church, and I'm talking to kids, people, everybody.
yeah,
To me, that's being the church. That's representing Christ to the fullest. That's ministry, that's showing love of neighbor, 'cause that you actually care about the issues that they're dealing with. You know what I learned a long time ago? People don't care what I gotta say unless they see how much I care.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. That's what I live every day. And I brought that energy to Delaney Hall. Delaney Hall is such a beautiful place because you got people from all walks of life, right? You got these revolutionaries, you got these Muslims, you got Jewish folks, you got just all together in this little melting pot, all different races and genders, uh, however they classify themselves. It's so beautiful. This one person came out in full on drag the other day. I was dying. I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm rocking with him. He's cool." You know what I mean? But you gonna come protest? I'm with you. I stand right next to you. But the self-care that they ha the care and hospitality, people are bringing food, restaurants are just giving, dumplings from Chinese restaurants, they're giving food. There's a radical hospitality tent for the families that can't get in for a visitation. So this community has formed outside that we all love and respect one another, look out for one another, and that's kinda like what we've done here in Trenton, and it's just an extension,
Mhm.
so
And that's the transformation.
nobody's paid, by the way, hold up, just for the record, nobody's a paid protester.
No.
No, no, no.
Except the reason and so much every accusation is a confession, right?
Mhm,
And they are paying folks on the right to
mhm.
come out and agitate. They are paying folks on the right to be influencers online, to make posts, to purport these narratives. So that's the crazy part is like, no, most of the folks who are not most, all of the folks who are out there to protect immigrants, to protest what's happening at Delaney Hall or at Whipple here in Minnesota are not there because they're paid. But there are folks on the right who are getting paid to agitate and to muddy the narrative. And that is an absolute fact that there's a lot of money behind muddying this narrative and taking away from the witness that you are giving there.
Well, the press can paint whatever picture they're gonna paint, I'm still gonna be out there religiously, so,
Yeah.
my congregation's been out there, other faith leaders and colleagues have been out there, but most importantly, the families have been out there. There's a video floating around this 10-year-old girl who was letting them have it, but
Mm,
and she's amazing, she's a daughter of somebody that was detained, but
wow.
something happened to her the other day, they denied her visitation, and she actually fainted and collapsed,
Mm,
feet, and she sprained her ankle, and and she was wailing. It was a sad situation. But those are the things that are just like, why are we doing this to people? Like, is America that evil? That's the question.
well, and that's why, I'm so grateful for everyone who's here and for everyone who's going to watch this later because I think there's a lot of convenient deniability for people that they want they're very quick to believe that like, oh, this is exaggerated, these things aren't really happening, these are fake videos. I can tell you guys right now and anyone who's watching, Pastor Eric is not an AI creation.
No, I'm
uh
real. See me, 1746 South Clinton Avenue, Trenton. We can have a conversation.
you know and I think a lot of people, and you mentioned Pastor Martin Niemöller earlier, that that famous poem,
Because
first
I
they
wasn't
came.
a trade yep, first they came for the trade unionist, I was not a trade unionist, so I ain't say anything. Yeah, I know how it
Mhm.
goes. Finally, when they came for him, ain't nobody was left.
Exactly, and I think that's another reason why, I want to continue to try to build these bridges of a broader movement. The local and the grassroots is really important, and it's also important to know that, when we were going through what we are going through in Minneapolis, I had so many people from Broadview, from Oak Park in Chicago who were sharing support, who were praying, who were giving advice about what they had done. Had folks from North Carolina where they had gone through things in Charlotte with ICE. They were sending, inspirational things. They were sending prayers. They were sending mutual aid support. And I know the main question I'm probably going to get after this is, what can we do? How can we help with what's going on with Pastor Eric? And I'm going to give you a chance to share that for what's happening in New Jersey. And I also want to say, if you're asking that question, the first thing to do is look around your local community because this is happening everywhere. Immigrants are getting targeted everywhere, and also everywhere there are faith communities and pastors who are working against it, who are putting themselves on the line, who are lifting up a gospel that visits folks in prison, that protects the vulnerable. Um, no matter where you are in the reddest parts of this country, there are little tiny churches and large churches sometimes who are speaking out. So the first thing I would say to you, if you're saying like, how can we support what's happening in New Jersey? Work on your own local network, work on your own grassroots network because they're moving from place to place. They're coming everywhere. And the more that we can each build up our local networks, we're going to be more prepared to fight against this on a level. But Eric, what's your answer to that? Because that's again the number one question is like, how can people support? How can people help raise awareness about what's happening in New Jersey right now?
Use your voice.
Amen.
Use your voice. If we claim and have the audacity to claim the name Christian, the audacity,
Hmm.
please open up your Bibles, open up them 4 Gospels, and start reading them red letters.
Hmm.
Jesus gives you the framework. And I know a lot of people are gonna be like, "Oh, Romans 13 says obey the law." But I'll tell you, Acts also tells you that we obey God over human authority.
Hmm.
So, we obey authority when it lines up with the law of Christ, that law of love, the well-being of the other. That's when you obey the just laws. But as Dr. King will tell you, an unjust law is no law at all. So I'll go back with the apostles in Acts, telling you we obey God over human authority. Because when human authority contradicts the law of love that Christ gives us, we as Christians need to be following Christ. And if you choose not to follow Christ and buy into this hateful rhetoric and ideology, then you might as well not call yourself a Christian.
Hmm.
And I'll draw a line in that sand because I dealt with too many fake pastors. I had a confrontation with the ICE pastor, which was entertaining. He was dressed just like an ICE agent. I'll send you the picture. You'll get a kick out of this one. But
Hmm.
if we have the audacity, that boldness, that arrogance to claim the name Christian, follow Christ. What did Jesus do? It's so cliche because that was a thing in the 90s, I think it was. What would Jesus do? No, but seriously, what would Jesus do?
Yeah.
Think about it. Pray about it. Act upon that. Act upon the gospel. Act upon loving your neighbor as yourself. Speak up in your communities. And you're like, well, Pastor Eric, this is just too much. And I was a good Lutheran. I'm going to quote Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa said, it's not the great things that you do, but it's the small things that you do with love that affect true
Mm.
change.
Yeah.
That little voice, that helping your neighbor, that you warning folks if you see an ice in your community on your social media chats or wherever you at, calling your neighbor. Them small acts is what is needed now because we cannot normalize what's going on.
No.
We've seen this too much through history. We have the knowledge and understanding of it. But the question really remains, do you really love yourself and your neighbor? Because allowing your neighbors to be persecuted is self-hatred. If we're all a reflection of God, if we're all a part about this thing called the beloved community.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad to call you a colleague and to be pastors together in this imperfect church that we nonetheless remain within and work towards a better way to follow the gospel. Um, Yeah, when you were saying, I know folks are gonna say Romans 13, but I'm gonna point you to Acts. It reminded me so much of Jesus throughout the Gospels when Jesus would say, "You have heard this, but let me tell you this." So I know the Spirit is speaking through you. I wanna close us here, by just offering a prayer for you and for all those who are with you in Delaney Hall, and also for the 15 folks here in Minneapolis who were arrested yesterday. So, everyone here, I invite you to pray with us.
And real quick, just a disclosure, at a time in the past couple of weeks, I had 37 community members in Delaney Hall that were snatched in a 5-block radius from this church.
37 from all right, well, I'm gonna add that too.
I don't know where they are now because they've been moving a lot of people in the past couple of days, but
Yeah,
please keep them in prayer.
yeah,
Pray for my strength, but don't pray for me. Pray for them. Pray
yeah,
that God uses me to help them because it's never about me.
thank you. Well, I'm gonna pray a little bit for you too. Let us pray. God, we thank you for the opportunity to respond to this calling, and I give you thanks, God, for the calling that has come upon Pastor Eric's life, and God, the calling that you have given me, and each person here who has been a part of watching this conversation, has been a witness, and who will go on, God, to go back to their communities and to be a witness and to be a voice for what's happening not only in New Jersey and Minneapolis, but across the United States. We lift to you, especially, God, these 37 folks from within a 5 block radius of Pastor Eric's church. God, we ask that you would help them to be tracked down, that you would provide the means for their loved ones to be able to find out where they are. In the midst of such fear and intensity, God, we ask that you would protect them, protect their lives, their health in the midst of the horrific conditions that they're likely living under. And we pray, God, not just for those 37, but God, for so many people in this country who are currently detained in detention centers in conditions that may be almost unimaginable. And we ask, God, that you would open the eyes of Americans, that we might see what's really happening in front of us, that we would refuse to look away, that we would refuse to shut our mouths, to silence ourselves. We ask, God, that you would bring courage to our midst. I ask, God, that you would continue to protect Pastor Eric and all those who are with him protesting at Delaney Hall, that you would bring courage and pursuit of justice to New Jersey state government, including to the governor. Ask, God, that you would protect all those who were arrested yesterday in Minneapolis. And God, that you might remind us that you have called us for this moment, that you are not among the rich and the powerful, but God, you are often most powerfully present among those who are imprisoned, among those who are falsely accused, among those who are poor, those who are sick. And we ask, God, that we might see you more clearly and find our own voices. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, well, I'm going to leave out with a question. If this was
Uh-oh.
really about deportations,
Yeah.
why are we building so many facilities? Did you know, and you can look this up, Geo Group has actually sued the government for not filling private prison beds out west.
Wow.
They're under these contracts, the beds have to be filled. So when they're not filled, what happens? They get to
Right.
sue. And they make $40,000 to $60,000 a year off of a bed fill. Just putting that in perspective.
Well, and we all need to look into our own pension funds, retirement funds. Where are people investing? Who's invested in private prison?
Thrivent invests in private prisons.
Yeah.
So that, these things have to be put out there. Just like Princeton Seminary, this great land of progressivism. You look behind the curtain, just like the Wizard of Oz, when they tell you when you go to the Emerald City, don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. Michael Fish was that man behind that curtain, who's one of the wealthiest prison profiteers of the United States. He owns Viapath and Global Tel-Link, which is all the tablets and phones that people incarcerated use, including those that are on immigrant letters. So,
Well, stay tuned for our future conversation on not only Princeton Seminary, but on the ways that religious institutions, including our own ELCA seminaries, in some cases, are complicit. And you guys got to follow the money. So, Eric, I know you're a pastor, but I think you've got a journalist's heart in you as well. So we've got a lot in common.
being incarcerated 12 years, I read a lot.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I know everyone is so grateful to be acquainted with you. You can follow Pastor Eric on Substack. You can connect with him on Facebook. Anywhere else that they can go to kind of follow
Instagram,
what you're doing?
Kussman on Facebook, you'll find me. You'll
Okay.
find I post a lot of stuff on Facebook and Instagram because I'm not like I'm still technologically deficient. I like to call myself. You
Yeah.
go away for 12 years when the world just has a techno boom. You come out like, what's going on in this world? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But
Yeah.
those are the easiest ways. I'm always posting updates. I post a lot of things going on in New Jersey. If anybody's local in the tri-state area, if they ever want to come join for a Moral Monday in front of Delaney Hall, there's worship, there's sermons, there's prayerful acts going on, pastoral care for families, and even those that you've come in contact with are on the lines. Come be a part of the beloved community any way you can.
God is alive. Thanks for this conversation. We'll
Amen.
talk soon.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.